As I said, welcome everyone. It's lovely to see you and have you here. And it's April 1st. We are officially out of our 3-month retreat. And so, again, want to say a huge thank you to our board members that filled in for us and facilitated, some of them ways stepping out of their comfort zone. We have such a wonderful board here at the monastery, very harmonious and hardworking. Ronnie, there's a really good chair.
A really good one. No?
Yeah, a really good one. Yeah. So tonight I want to I want to start here. I had this on my altar the whole time of the retreat, and this is in Pali. Mano Kubangana Gamma Dhamma Mano Seta Mano Maya. This is the opening of the Dhammapada. All experience is preceded by the mind, led by the mind, made by the mind. Powerful words that the Buddha spoke. All experience is preceded by the mind, made by the mind, led by the mind. And that's what I want to talk about tonight. What does that mean? How does that work? And what does that mean? So how does that work? The Buddha said this almost 2,600 years ago. All experience is preceded by the mind. And now, with everything that is possible in neuroscience, it's becoming like absolutely irrefutable. How does this work? I'll start by reading a sutta where the Buddha breaks it down a little bit. I won't read the whole sutta. And this is from the Numerical Discourses, the Book of Fours. And it's sutta number 45. And this is the Buddha having a conversation with someone named Rohitasa. And Rohitasa had been, now is a deva, but in a previous existence had a lot of mystic power. And during the previous life, before his deva life, had tried to travel and find the end of the world. And it didn't work. And he comes and asks the Buddha about that. Can you find the end of the world by traveling? And the Buddha says no. And Rohitasa is like, wow, he knows a lot because he knows that. And Rohitasa answers, it's incredible, sir. It's amazing how well this was said by the Buddha, that you can't find the end of the world by traveling. And the Buddha goes on to say, friend, I say it's not possible to know or see or reach the end of the world by traveling to a place where there's no being born, growing old, dying, passing away, or being reborn. But I also say there's no making an end of suffering without reaching the end of the world. A bit of a conundrum. And then he goes on to explain what he was talking about. For it's in this 6-foot-long body, this fathom-long body, this is the Buddha, for it is in this fathom-long body with its perception and intellect, with its perception and mind, that I describe the world, its origin, its cessation, and the practice that leads to its cessation. The end of the world can never be reached by traveling, but without reaching the end of the world, there's no release from suffering. And the world that he's talking about is in this body mind with its perception and intellect. We often talk about, oh, he's in his own world. That's exactly right. We're all in our own little world. Like literally, literally. And it happens through this perception and then the cognition, the intellect, what the intellect does with this perception. The Buddha gives us many different doorways and frameworks to think about the human condition, the human life. And the most basic one that he gives is where, think of it as a pie, and you can cut it down the middle, and it's materiality and mentality, body, mind. This is the simplest breakdown that he gives, framework. And then there's another one that he does a lot, and it's called in Pali, it's the word khanda, and that gets translated often as aggregate. Well, I'm not a construction worker. I had to look up what that word meant when I started reading the Buddha's suttas. It's like a pile, like a collection. So with the breakdown, cutting up the human life experience condition into 5, it's still this materiality, but then the mentality piece gets cut up into 4. And the first one is feeling tone. Every single nanosecond of our life, we're making contact, we're having sensory input, and there's a feeling tone to it. It's pleasant, unpleasant, or somewhere in the middle. So the first part of mentality, breakdown of mentality, is this feeling tone. And the second one is perception. And then the third one is this intellect, this sankhara is the Pali word. All of our thinking and proliferation. And then the fourth is consciousness, which is just knowing. That's all consciousness can do, is know. Feeling tone, perception, mental formations, mental constructions, a lot of our thinking and our emotions, and then consciousness. And so this is what the Buddha says, that our world is here inside of our own little body mind. And it is mainly being driven by this perception and intellect. And so how does this work? Now neuroscience can tell us that's exactly how it works. So consciousness, the knowing part, every nanosecond of our life that we're not in a coma, there's consciousness. We're not unconscious. There's consciousness, which is just this knowing. And it turns out I'll give an example. And honestly, the visual sense is the easiest one for it to click and to understand. So consciousness can only know shape and color. That's it. That's what consciousness can do. Our experience of the world is fleshed out, filled in through perception. So I walk into a room and on the table is an apple. It's a red apple, not a green one. A red apple. Consciousness just knows roundness and redness. Perception fills in that this is an apple. That's why a baby is just it's conscious of things and knowing things, but it doesn't. Those of us that have raised children realize, there's that moment when the baby realizes that this thing that they're putting in their mouth is actually attached to them. It's their foot. They don't know yet it's their foot. But piece by piece, babies are being taught what these things that they're knowing, their perceptions are being trained, and now they see redness and roundness, and they hear many times apple, 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 and then they know it's an apple. their perception fills it in. So we're literally living in our own simulations of the world, each and every one of us. And this is how optical illusions work, right? Like you can have an optical illusion where essential pieces of the sense data are taken out, but we'll see the whole picture because our perception is filling it in, even though it's not even there. If we get enough information, perception fills it in. And we've all had that experience probably of this works when our sensory apparatus is functioning well enough and we're in our right minds and our perceptions are accurate enough for us to navigate the world. But you can play with your perception, right? You can get hypnotized, you can take drugs, and then your perception is operating quite differently. And we've all had that experience of playing with our perception. You lie in the field and you look up at the clouds and then you start seeing things, or you can do it with flames in a fire. So we live in our own world, filled in through our perception. And the Buddha taught us that 2,600 years ago. And it gets more vivid than that. Like the perceptions that we have are based on our sense apparatus, and they determine the world that we live in. Other beings have different sense apparatus. Bees can see ultraviolet lights. Dogs can hear things we can't hear. The world that they live in is different simply just because their sensory apparatus is different. Bats can barely see. They navigate the world so differently through echolocation. I was a speech language pathologist my most recent career, and I had a child that I worked with that had been blind since birth. She was 3, and I would go to meet her in the reception area and bring her to the therapy room, and she was already learning how to no cane, how to walk using echolocation. So she'd walk along, she could walk in front of me going, just clicking with her tongue, and already had figured out the world, like in a hallway. I mean, I wouldn't want to let her loose in the forest that she's never been in, but it was really stunning. And her mom would walk behind her and was coaching her slightly, and you could see her learning. Yeah. But then, honestly, it gets even more. Another way for the penny to drop about this is our dream world. Our dream world, our perception is sort of cut loose. It's not tied so much to this raw sensory data. So that's why in your dreams you can create you're creating other worlds that are based on different perceptions, right? Where you can fly, and maybe your skin color is different, your gender is different. Sometimes you're an animal, because then we wake up and we bring our perception back onto a tight leash. And it turns out it's even more than that. This whole idea of the world being made in this fathom-long body through the perceptions and intellect. Now neuroscience is showing us that a huge, more than the way that our perceptions are simulating the external world internally and representing it. Even more than that, the intellect, the brain, is predicting we're spending more energy and more time, not just simulating this external world, but actually anticipating, creating, anticipating, predicting. This is the Bayesian brain hypothesis, predictive processing. And there's more and more and more conclusive evidence that this is how we navigate the world. And so this whole, self-fulfilling prophecy, this is very real. We anticipate the perceptions that we're going to experience, and it has a huge influence on what we actually do experience. And this is why we're all experiencing the world so differently. It's incredible. The primacy of the mind. All experience is preceded by the mind, made by the mind, led by the mind. The primacy of the mind. And so when we start to understand this more and more, there's just so much more buy-in and motivation for taking care of our mind and training our mind. And it would actually be more accurate for us to begin to realize, oh, the body is in the mind. And we very much think that a lot of times, because of all of our Western conditioning, we often link the mind and the brain. The mind is much bigger than the brain. And we think of the brain being in the body. But much more accurately, the body is in the mind. The mind, all experience is preceded by the mind. The mind is bigger. The mind is more foundational. The mind comes first. And I mean, there's a whole nother body of evidence reinforcing this, this inseparability and the primacy of the mind. All of the things that we're beginning to understand about mind-body connection and health and well-being. Books like The Body Keeps Score. There's now evidence that if a woman has experienced sexual assault or sexual molestation, much more chance of her contacting cervical cancer. It's sometimes now even getting called rape cancer. Eve Ensler, who wrote the Vagina Monologues, and herself a victim of child molestation for over 3 years in her young life, and then has become such an advocate for other women that have had this terrible trauma worldwide and done so much work. There's another whole body of research I just learned about like last week. And it's this psychology professor, old now, 78. She was the first woman tenured at Harvard in the psychology department. And her name is Ellen Langer. And she's done amazing research about the primacy of the mind. I could talk the whole rest of the talk about it's so exciting. But she did, and some of this research is old. Like she was onto this in the 70s. And she's really a pioneer and fascinating to listen to. But she did this experiment a long time ago with chambermaids. There were 84 people in the study, that all women that worked in hotels, fixing the room. And she asked all of them if they got much exercise, and all of them were like, no, we don't. And then she divided them in half. So one was the experimental group and one was the control group. And she taught the experimental group that their work was actually laden with exercise. It was full of exercise, and taught them, when you're making the bed, it's like the rowing machine, and like and really made it clear that they were exercising. 4 weeks later, Amanda's laughing because we learned about this when we were on a retreat together, and I've looked it up, Amanda, and it's like she's incredible. The researcher, Ellen Langer. 4 weeks later, the experimental group on 5 measures, they had lost weight, hip waist ratio had changed, body mass index had changed, blood pressure had gone down, with no other change except that their mind now understood that they were getting lots of exercise. Yeah. And then their body responded. The primacy of the mind. So this is some of how it works. I'm just tipping my toe in the ocean of the reality of this. The primacy of the mind. All experience is preceded by the mind, led by the mind, made by the mind. This was the beginning of the Dhammapada. So what does this mean? What does this mean? The Buddha goes on to say, so all experience is preceded by the mind, made by the mind, led by the mind. That's the first verse of the Dhammapada. And then the second and third verse are, speak or act with a corrupted mind and suffering follows, as the wagon wheel follows the hoof of the ox. All experience is preceded by the mind, led by the mind, made by the mind. Speak or act with a clear mind, and happiness follows like a never departing shadow. This is what it means. It means that our lives, the quality of our lives, really rests on the quality of our minds. And when we're speaking and acting from a impure, miserly, small mind, suffering will follow. We're making ourselves miserable. Like the wagon wheel follows the ox. That metaphor is just like this. You think about the ox is locked in the yoke and burdened by pulling this wagon. And if we speak and act with a clear mind, happiness follows like a never departing shadow. A very, very different feel to that, right? A shadow is weightless, and it's so connected and in tune. And sometimes your shadow is bigger, even bigger than what's making the shadow, depending on where the sun is. If we speak and act with a clear mind, happiness follows. The primacy of the mind. In the Abhidhamma, it talks about the body. The Abhidhamma, most of the time, I'm always sharing quotes from, let me back up. I've never talked about this, but there's these 3 baskets. That's how it gets talked about. These 3 baskets of the Buddha's teachings. And the one that I'm always quoting from is the sutta, the basket of sutta, the discourses. Very occasionally, I've quoted here from the Vinaya, the basket of the monastic discipline and code. And I've never quoted from the Abhidhamma, which is the 3rd basket. But in the Abhidhamma, and the Abhidhamma is very complicated. And this is one of the reasons and I've actually never read it. That's another reason why I don't know it. Probably the best reason. But it's been quoted to me, and I do know that in the Abhidhamma, it talks about there's 4 sources for this physical body, for the materiality. And one is karma, our old karma. And the suttas say that as well. That the body I have, the gender that I am, the eyesight that I have, the intelligence that I have, like all of this is old karma. And then what I do with it is this present karma, new karma. So this is the big one. And then another source for this body ongoingly is nutriment, what I feed it. And the third category is its temperature, which is kind of like, the environment that I'm in, the climate that I'm in, et cetera, et cetera. But the fourth one is mind. So our mind is creating and influencing our body every nanosecond, all the time. And this is why we know this, right? Like you get a really good sleep, or you go on vacation. Well, how do you feel and look? It depends what kind of vacation. If you go on this tour where you're changing locations every day, you might not come back looking like amazingly rested, but the mind. And when the mind is clear and when the mind is wholesome, it has this beautiful, beautiful effect and influence on the body. So, and it's these four things. So the reality is, I could have the most wholesome mind. My heart could be full of love. If I've just eaten food that's, tainted, I'll still get food poisoning. The mind doesn't do everything, but it definitely has an influence. So there's such high stakes for us to really pay attention and take very, very good care of our minds. There are many times in the sutta basket that it talks about not shirking the responsibility of cultivating wholesome mind states. And there's this premise when we start to learn the Buddha's teachings that I have a lot of choice about my mind. Before I came to the Buddha's teachings, thoughts came and thoughts left, and I didn't realize that I could actually, influence what was happening and direct it and incline it, which we can. And it will change the quality of our lives. There's nothing else that we could do that will change the quality of our lives so reliably, as taking care of our own mind. So how do we do this? I think the first thing is that we just have to start where we are and be very honest about it. And the Buddha's asking us to do this. And invariably, when we begin to meditate and when we come to the Buddha's teachings, we're starting with an untrained mind. And we're starting with a mind that has had lots of influence that's not underscoring the vital importance of wholesome mind states. All of us have been influenced by that. It can't be otherwise. And then we also often come to the Buddha's teachings with, like we come to most things, with mindset, even if we're not fully admitting it to ourselves, of, well, what am I going to get out of this? This is how we've lived our lives. And we have to chip away at that and understand that meditation is different than anything else we've done. And we want to begin to see some of this selfish, greedy, graspy, competitive, tight attitudes and approaches that we've often had to many things. We want to start to feel that, that it doesn't work. It doesn't work in meditation. All of those orientations don't work in meditation. And I want to encourage each and every one of us to examine, why am I meditating? And there are many reasons to meditate, and many of them are very, very good. But I want you, as much as possible, to get in touch with, why are you meditating? And work with it, that it becomes as wholesome, as loving, as generous, as kind, as gentle, as noble a reason as possible. Reasons like it's the most worthwhile thing for me to do. And it's the most loving thing that I can do for myself and for the people around me and the people in my life. It might be whatever way, or I'm just very, very curious about what's going on in there and how this all works. Or I want to know the truth. But more and more, we want to have these kinds of motivations for meditating versus I want to get something. The more we can come to meditation with the idea of giving, I'm going to give my time, I'm going to give my energy, I'm going to give my understanding, I'm going to give my time to this next 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. This is a very, very beautiful orientation. It's what Ajahn Brahm says he does. He approaches his meditation as dana, and dana in the Buddha's teachings is this generosity. It's an act of giving, not an act of getting, and it will make a huge difference. So, how does this work? It works gradually, and it works bit by bit. Scott's asked for similes, so this is how it works. The Buddha gives a beautiful simile about rain. And this is how the mind goes from small and tight and self-centered and what the Buddha calls corrupt, miserly, to becoming clear and expansive and pure and more wholesome. The Buddha says, he gives this simile a few times, but I'm going to just quote it from the connected discourses in the book of 55, Sutta 38. And the sutta is called Rain. And he talks about water, it rains, and water flows downhill to fill the hollows, crevices, and creeks. And as they become full, they fill up the pools. Pools fill up the lakes. Lakes fill up the streams. Streams fill up the rivers. As the rivers become full, they fill up the ocean. In the same way, drop by drop, bit by bit, we fill our mind so that it becomes an ocean of wholesomeness. So I'll end there.